Welcome back to Saltwater Stories. You might remember our previous journeys into the breathtaking world of coral reefs, those vibrant underwater cities teeming with life.
Yeah, absolutely stunning places.
But today, we're charting a course to a reef structure unlike any we've explored before, the captivating realm of atolls.
That's right. Forget the familiar coastlines or the reefs hugging volcanic slopes for a moment.
Huh?
Today, our exploration takes us way out into the vast open ocean to uncover the secrets of these, well, truly remarkable formations.
Picture this, everyone. An emerald ring, almost like it was dropped into the deep blue, a circle of vibrant reefs and tiny islands embracing this tranquil turquoise lagoon.
It's an amazing image, and some of these structures are just immense. You can actually see them from space.
Wow. And these aren't just pretty sights, they are living landscapes, right?
Yeah.
Crafted by countless tiny creatures over vast stretches of time.
Exactly, living structures.
Yeah.
So our aim today is to really get to grips with these rings of life. We'll discover what makes an atoll unique, how they seem to rise from the depths of the open ocean, and the fascinating ecosystems they nurture.
Sounds great. Prepare for an adventure into a world shaped by, well, miniature architects and monumental geological processes.
Couldn't have put it better myself.
Okay, so first things first. What exactly is an atoll? It's a word that conjures up images of remote, idyllic places, doesn't it?
It does indeed. And the word atoll itself has an interesting origin. It comes from the Divihi language of the Maldives.
Oh, really?
Yeah, where it was originally atholu, meaning palm of the hand, which is, a pretty fitting description for their sheep sometimes.
I like that.
And way back in the 19th century, Charles Darwin, during his famous Beagle voyage, he was really struck by these unique formations.
Right.
He described them as a circular group of coral islets, or sometimes a lagoon island.
So Darwin was one of the first to really recognize them as something special.
Absolutely, a pioneer in understanding them. And our modern scientific understanding really builds upon those initial observations.
Okay.
So now we define an atoll as basically a ring-shaped coral reef, or it could be an island or even a series of small islands. And the key is that it encircles a central lagoon.
A ring shape around the lagoon. Got it.
And it's worth noting this ring isn't always perfectly closed up. Sometimes there are gaps or parts might be incomplete.
But that central ring of coral, that's the defining feature, yeah.
Precisely. That annular reef structure, the living coral rim, is fundamentally what makes an atoll.
Okay.
And often, kind of perched along this rim, especially on the side facing the prevailing winds and waves, you'll find these small, low-lying islands or cays.
Cays.
Yeah, or in the Pacific, they're often called motus.
Motus.
Okay.
And these little islands, they aren't like leftovers from the original volcano.
Oh, good question. No, not at all. They are formed from what we call reef detritus.
Reef detritus.
Yeah.
Like reef rubbish.
Huh. Sort of. It's broken pieces of coral skeletons, fragments of this special kind of algae, shells, and the remains of tiny organisms called foraminifera.
Okay.
All this stuff gets washed up by waves and then it naturally cements together over time.
Right.
But because they are built this way, they are typically very low-lying, usually less than 5 meters above sea level.
Wow, that's not very high.
No, which makes them particularly vulnerable, susceptible to the impacts of rising sea levels and powerful storm surges.
So these picture-perfect island paradises are actually quite fragile. But you mentioned some atolls are different, uplifted ones.
Yes, exactly. There are some really fascinating examples of ancient atolls that have been pushed up by geological forces over millennia. Think of places like Lefou or Rennell Island. These can have quite significant landmass and a very different look compared to the typical low sandy islets we usually picture.
Interesting. Now, what about that central lagoon? It seems like it's a core part of the whole structure.
Absolutely crucial. The central lagoon is basically the space that remains after the volcanic island. The one the corals first grew around, has gradually sunk beneath the ocean surface.
That's where the mountain used to be.
Pretty much. And it's important to stress this. It's not a flooded volcanic crater. That's a common misconception.
Ah, okay. Good point.
These lagoons can be surprisingly deep and cover vast areas, sometimes making up, believe it or not, up to 80% of the entire atoll's area.
80%. That's huge.
Wow.
What's the water like in there? Is it different?
Generally, yes. The waters inside the lagoon are usually much calmer than on the turbulent outer reefs. It's a more sheltered environment.
Makes sense.
And you often find smaller coral reefs, we call them patch reefs, growing up from the lagoon floor. These create all sorts of diverse little habitats within the bigger structure.
So we have this ring of life surrounding a calm lagoon,
Hmm.
all sitting out in the middle of the ocean. How does this incredible process even start? You mentioned a volcano sinking.
Exactly. Atolls are essentially, you could say, biological masterpieces built on geological foundations. The story typically kicks off with a volcanic island erupting from the seabed.
Right.
Then, over vast geological timescales, once that volcano becomes dormant, it starts to slowly sink. Subsidence, we call it.
And we know this happens.
Oh, yes. We have solid evidence from deep drilling projects on atolls like Inuitak and Midway.
Drilling. They drilled right through the coral.
They did. Scientists drilled down through thick layers of limestone, that's the old coral reef material, and eventually hit the volcanic basalt rock far, far below.
Wow.
It really confirmed the idea. It's a testament to the power of nature, that life just keeps building upwards on these slowly disappearing foundations.
It really is like the corals are in this incredibly slow race against a sinking island. What are they actually building with?
The primary building material is calcium carbonate. It's the same mineral that makes up things like chalk and limestone. And it's secreted or produced by the hard or stony corals. They build these intricate skeletons. But these corals aren't the only builders involved in this massive construction job.
Oh, who else helps out?
Well, certain types of algae, coralline algae, are absolutely crucial, especially these encrusting red algae, like one called porolithon. They act like the natural cement of the reef.
Algae as cement. How does that work?
They also deposit calcium carbonate, like the corals, but they grow over and bind together the coral skeletons and other bits of debris, making the whole structure much stronger.
Ah, okay. Like glue.
Exactly. This is especially important on the high-energy outer edges of the reef, the part facing the open ocean waves. It forms something called the algal ridge,
Right.
and in some really remarkable cases, like Rose Atoll in American Samoa, these coralline algae are actually the dominant reef builders, even more so than the corals themselves. Imagine tiny plants being the main architects.
That's incredible. Algae doing the heavy lifting. And what about all the white sandy beaches we associate with atolls? Where does that sand come from?
Ugh, the beautiful sand. That's largely the result of other organisms that also have calcium carbonate parts. When they die, their shells and skeletons break down.
Like what kind of organisms?
Things like mollusks, shells, even giant clams contribute over time. And also countless tiny single-celled organisms called foraminifera.
For what now?
Foraminifera. Tiny little things, but billions of them. Their shells and skeletons break down into sand-sized particles, creating the sediment that makes up the lagoon floor and helps build those idyllic islets.
Wow.
It's a constant cycle, really. Life, death, breakdown, all contributing to the physical structure of the atoll.
So a real community effort, this massive construction project happening over millennia. How do scientists even begin to study something so vast and, well, complex?
That's a challenge. Studying atolls requires a mix of high-tech tools and good old-fashioned getting your feet wet, so to speak.
Okay.
Scientists use high-resolution satellite imagery to get the big picture, map out the general shape and features.
Right, from space.
Yeah, and then they follow up with detailed field surveys. This might involve diving, using sonar, sometimes even deploying underwater robots to get a closer look. They identified different types of seafloor areas of sand, mud, hard pavement-like rock, and of course the complex 3D structures of the coral reefs themselves, like spur and groove formations or those patch reefs in the lagoon.
Mapping it all out.
Exactly. And this detailed mapping, often compiled and shared by organizations like NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, is vital. It helps us understand how these intricate ecosystems function and how to best protect them. It's like creating a detailed blueprint of a living city.
It sounds like these atolls hold a lot of secrets, not just about life today, but about Earth's history too.
They absolutely do. The very structure of an atoll is like a history book written in stone and life.
How so?
Well, the thickness of that limestone layer tells you about how long coral has been growing. The depth of the lagoon gives clues about subsidence. The shape of the ring, the volcanic rock base far below it all tells a story.
A story of
Of volcanic activity, how quickly the land sank, how fast the coral managed to grow upwards, and crucially, how sea levels have changed over vast periods of time.
like reading the past.
Precisely. By extracting core samples, drilling down, and pulling up long cylinders of the reef, material scientists can analyze the layers. It's kind of like reading tree rings or analyzing ice cores from glaciers. They reveal past conditions.
Natural time capsules. That's amazing. And the lagoon, you said it's not just trapped water, it's the space where the island used to be.
That's the key idea. The lagoon is fundamentally the space once occupied by the central volcanic island. Its characteristics, how deep it is, how big it is, whether it has those inner patch reefs,
Ah,
and really importantly, how well it connects to the open ocean through channels in the reef ring. All these things are direct results of how the atoll formed over time.
and that affects the life inside.
Profoundly, these factors control how water circulates within the lagoon, the water chemistry, and ultimately the specific types of marine life that can thrive there. And it also means that human activities, like dredging deeper channels for boats, can actually have significant, long-lasting effects on these delicate natural patterns.
Right. Now, this whole incredible process is driven by these tiny coral polyps.
Yeah.
It's easy to think of coral as just, pretty rock or maybe some kind of plant swaying in the current.
That's a very common misconception, but corals are actually animals.
Animals? Really?
Yes, they belong to the phylum Cnidaria, which means they're related to jellyfish and sea anemones.
Wow. Okay. Not plants at all.
Not at all. And when we talk about the architects of these massive reefs and atolls, we're primarily focusing on the hard corals or stony corals, sometimes called hermatypic corals.
Hermatypic.
It just means reef building. These are the corals with that amazing ability to secrete a hard calcium carbonate skeleton. That's the framework of the reef.
So there are other types of corals too.
Yes, there are soft corals, which are beautiful and important parts of the ecosystem, but they lack that rigid skeleton, so they don't contribute to building the main reef structure in the same way.
Got it. So these hard corals are the master builders. What does one of these coral animals actually look like up close, if you could shrink down?
Okay, imagine shrinking way down. The basic unit of a hard coral is called a polyp. Think of it as a tiny, simple, sac-like body. It's basically a cylinder with only one opening at the top.
One opening.
Yeah, that single opening serves as both the mouth for taking in food and the exit for waste products. Simple but effective.
Huh. And around the mouth.
Around the mouth is a ring of tentacles. These are really important. They use them to capture food, for defense against predators, and even to keep their surface clean from settling sediment.
So they're actively grabbing tiny snacks floating by with those tentacles.
Exactly. The polyp's body itself has an outer layer, the epidermis, and an inner layer lining the digestive space, the gastrodermis. There's a jelly-like layer in between,
Uh-huh.
and the hard coral polyp lives protected inside a little stony cup that it secretes itself. We call that the calyx or the corallite.
A little stony home. How big are these individual polyps?
They're tiny. Individually, they're often just a millimeter or two across, maybe 3 millimeters for some.
That's small.
Yeah, it's truly mind-boggling when you think about it. These minuscule individuals working together over centuries to create structures visible from space.
Tiny builders creating gigantic islands. It's incredible. What do these polyps actually eat to get the energy for all this construction work?
Good question. They are primarily carnivores, and they actually do most of their feeding at night.
At night. Why then?
Well, that's when a lot of their main food source, tiny animal plankton called zooplankton, comes up closer to the surface.
Okay.
Their tentacles are armed with these specialized stinging cells called nematocysts.
Stinging cells. Like jellyfish.
Exactly like jellyfish. Think of them as microscopic harpoons. They can shoot out and capture small prey like tiny crustaceans or even minute fish larvae floating by.
Wow.
These nematocysts can also inject a mild venom to stun the prey. Then the tentacles move the captured food to the mouth for digestion inside the polyp.
Clever little hunters.
They are. And some corals can also trap tiny bits of organic matter floating in the water using a sticky mucus layer on their surface, which they then ingest.
It sounds like each polyp is kind of an independent little hunter working on its own.
Well, yes and no. While each polyp is an individual animal, most reef-building corals are colonial.
Colonial, meaning they live together.
Yes, they form interconnected groups of hundreds, thousands, even millions of genetically identical polyps.
How are they interconnected?
They aren't just living side by side like neighbors. They are physically connected by a thin layer of living tissue that stretches between the polyps over the skeleton. And beneath this tissue, there's a network of tiny channels. These channels allow them to share nutrients and even coordinate some activities, like maybe retracting their tentacles if there's a threat. It allows the entire colony to function almost like a single superorganism. It's remarkably efficient.
So it really is like a bustling underwater city where everyone is connected and sharing resources. That makes more sense for building something so big. But wait, how do they manage to grow so well and build these massive reefs, especially in what seems like the nutrient-poor waters of the open ocean. Isn't the tropical ocean often described as a desert?
That is the million-dollar question. And the answer lies in one of the most amazing partnerships in the natural world, the symbiotic relationship between corals and microscopic algae called zooxanthellae.
Zooxanthellae. That's a mouthful.
It is. You can think of them as zoox for short. These are tiny, single-celled plants, specifically a type of dinoflagellate, and they live inside the tissues of the coral polyp, mainly in that inner gastrodermis layer.
Inside the animal cells.
Yes, embedded right within the coral's tissue. It's an incredibly intimate relationship.
And symbiosis means it's a partnership where both benefit.
Precisely. It's a classic example of mutualism. The coral provides the zooxanthellae with a safe, protected environment, away from things that might eat them in the open water.
Okay, a safe house.
Exactly. And the coral also provides them with essential nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus, which are scarce in those tropical waters, plus the carbon dioxide they need for photosynthesis. And, of course, access to sunlight filtering through the water.
And what do the algae do for the coral in return?
This is the crucial part. These algae are photosynthetic. Just like plants on land, they use sunlight to convert carbon dioxide and water into energy sugars and other organic compounds.
Oh, it's photosynthesis.
They produce oxygen as a byproduct, which the coral can use for its own respiration. But more importantly, they transfer a significant portion of the food they make, sometimes up to 90%, directly to the coral host.
90%. So the coral is basically getting most of its food delivered internally from these tiny algae living inside it. That's incredible.
It is truly incredible. This remarkable partnership is what fuels the coral's ability to grow relatively quickly, to reproduce successfully, and critically for atoll formation, to secrete that calcium carbonate skeleton at a high rate.
So the algae help them build their stony homes faster.
Much faster than they could otherwise. This symbiosis allows coral reefs to flourish and build these massive structures, even in waters that don't have a lot of plankton or other nutrients floating around.
Amazing.
And as a beautiful side effect, the zooxanthellae are also responsible for the stunning range of colors, the browns, greens, yellows that we see in healthy corals. The pigments are in the algae.
So the coral animal itself is mostly transparent, and the color comes from its tenants.
Largely, yes. The coral tissue itself is often quite pale.
But I've heard so much about coral bleaching lately. What happens to this crucial partnership when that occurs? It sounds disastrous.
It is disastrous. Coral bleaching happens when corals get stressed. The main stressor we're seeing now is unusually high water temperatures, but it can also be triggered by things like pollution or too much sunlight or even very low temperatures.
Okay, stress. And what does the stress do?
Under stress, this delicate symbiotic relationship breaks down. The coral polyps actually expel the zooxanthellae living in their tissues. They kick them out.
They evict their main food source. Why would they do that?
It's complex, likely a physiological response to the stress. Perhaps the algae themselves become toxic at high temperatures. But the result is the coral loses its primary source of nutrition.
Right, 90% of its food gone.
Exactly. And it also loses its color because the colorful algae are gone. The white calcium carbonate skeleton shows through the now transparent coral tissue, making the coral appear pale or stark white, hence the term bleaching.
Is a bleached coral dead?
Not necessarily, not immediately, but it's severely weakened, essentially starving. It's much more susceptible to disease, and if the stressful conditions persist for too long and the algae don't return, the coral will eventually die. It's like a farmer losing all their crops. They might survive for a bit, but not long term.
And this bleaching is a huge concern because of climate change heating up the oceans, right?
Absolutely. Warming ocean temperatures directly linked to global climate change are the primary driver of the large-scale mass coral bleaching events we've been seeing with alarming frequency around the world. It's one of the biggest threats facing coral reefs and atolls today.
So understanding this symbiosis is key.
Definitely. And scientists are researching the different types or clades of zooxanthellae because some seem to be slightly more tolerant to heat than others. Understanding that variation is critical for predicting how reefs might cope or not cope in the future.
Okay, so corals build colonies, partner with algae. How do they make new corals? How do they reproduce?
Corals have a couple of main strategies. They use both asexual and sexual reproduction.
Asexual, like cloning themselves.
Exactly. Asexual reproduction creates genetically identical copies. This is really important for the growth of an existing coral colony, making it bigger. And it can also lead to the formation of entirely new colonies in some cases.
How does that work? Do they just split in two?
Several ways. Budding is common, where a new polyp develops as an outgrowth from a parent polyp, eventually becoming a separate, though still connected, individual within the colony.
Okay, adding new members to the city.
Right. Another really important method, especially for recovery after damage, is fragmentation. If a piece of a coral colony breaks off, maybe during a storm or bumped by an anchor,
Uh-huh.
that broken fragment, if it lands in a suitable spot, can actually survive and grow into an entirely new colony, genetically identical to the one it broke off from.
So breaking them isn't always bad.
It can be a natural way for them to spread. And this ability to regrow from fragments is something scientists and conservationists actually use in coral restoration efforts. They grow corals in nurseries and then plant the fragments back onto damaged reefs.
That's clever. Any other ways?
There are a few less common methods, too, like something called polyp bailout, where a single polyp detaches itself, or fission, where a polyp divides itself. But budding and fragmentation are the big ones for asexual reproduction.
And for creating new genetic combinations, which is super important for adapting to changing conditions like warming waters,
Yeah.
that needs sexual reproduction, right?
Precisely. Sexual reproduction involves the mixing of genes from two parents, creating offspring that are genetically unique. This diversity is the raw material for evolution and adaptation.
How do corals manage that? Do they have males and females?
It varies. Some coral species have separate male and female colonies. That's called gonochoric. Others are hermaphroditic, meaning a single colony or sometimes even a single polyp can produce both eggs and sperm.
Both. Wow.
Yeah, and some can even change sex during their lifetime, maybe starting as male and becoming female later, or vice versa. It's quite flexible.
So how does fertilization happen? In the water.
For most stony corals, yes. The most common method is a spectacular event called broadcast spawning.
Broadcast spawning. Sounds dramatic.
It really is. On certain nights of the year, often triggered by cues like water temperature, the length of the day, and crucially, the phase of the moon. Yes, the lunar cycle is often a key synchronizer. On these specific nights, huge numbers of coral colonies across a reef, sometimes involving many different species, all release their eggs and sperm into the water column simultaneously.
Wow, like a snowstorm underwater, but with eggs and sperm.
That's a pretty good description. It's a massive synchronized release. This increases the chances of sperm finding eggs from a different colony of the same species for external fertilization out in the water.
And what happens after fertilization?
The fertilized egg develops into a tiny free-swimming larva called a planula. It looks a bit like a fuzzy little blob.
Playa larva.
Right. These planulae drift in the ocean currents, sometimes for days, sometimes for weeks, depending on the species and conditions. They're searching for a suitable place to settle down.
What makes a place suitable?
They need a hard, stable surface, preferably clean of algae, where they can attach. If they find a good spot, they undergo metamorphosis. They transform into a single, tiny coral polyp, the founder of a brand new colony.
Amazing. But it sounds risky drifting around like that.
Incredibly risky. The vast majority of these planula larvae don't survive. They get eaten or drift too far out to sea or can't find a good spot to settle. Mortality is extremely high during this stage.
So it's a numbers game. Release millions and hope a few make it.
That's essentially the strategy for broadcast spawners. It's high risk, high reward in terms of dispersal and genetic mixing.
Is there another way?
Yes, the other main strategy is called brooding. In these species, fertilization happens internally.
Internally. How?
Male colonies, or hermaphrodites acting as males, release sperm, which is then taken in by female polyps, or hermaphrodites acting as females. The eggs are fertilized inside the parent polyp.
Okay.
The planula larvae then develop inside the parent for a period, protected before being released into the water as more developed, ready to settle larvae.
Ah, so they get a head start.
Exactly. These larvae tend to settle much faster, often within hours or days, and usually much closer to the parent colony. Survival rates for individual larvae are generally higher, but they don't disperse as far.
So different strategies have different pros and cons for the species.
Absolutely. Broadcast spawning is great for spreading genes far and wide, potentially colonizing new areas or promoting genetic diversity over large scales. Brooding offers a higher chance of local recruitment, helping replenish the parent reef, but maybe with less genetic mixing over distance. And asexual reproduction is key for colony growth and recovering from physical damage quickly.
It's all quite complex. And how quickly do these tiny polyps, whether they started from a fragment or a settled planula larva, actually build these enormous reef structures that eventually become atolls? It must take ages.
You are absolutely right. Coral growth is generally a surprisingly slow process, especially when you think about the scale of a reef or an atoll.
How slow are we talking?
Well, it varies a lot between species. The faster growing ones, typically the branching corals like staghorn or elkhorn corals, might grow maybe 10 to 15 centimeters. That's about 4 to 6 inches in length per year under ideal conditions.
Okay, that's something.
But the massive boulder-like corals, the big brain corals or star corals, they grow much, much more slowly, often less than 1 or 2 centimeters, less than an inch per year in height or diameter.
Wow, that's incredibly slow.
It really is. So the growth of an entire reef structure, building up vertically layer by layer, and certainly the formation of something as vast as an atoll, is an incredibly gradual process. It unfolds over centuries, millennia, even millions of years.
But individual corals can live a long time.
Oh, yes. Individual coral colonies can be very long-lived. Many live for decades, some for centuries. And scientists have found some deep-sea corals that are estimated to be thousands of years old.
Thousands of years for one colony. Amazing.
It is. But this combination of slow growth rates and long lifespans means that recovery from major damage to a reef, like from a big storm or a bleaching event or ship grounding, can take a very, very long time, decades or even centuries, for a reef to return to its former state if it can recover at all.
Right, that makes sense. Slow builders, slow healers. So we have these tiny animals working with their algal partners, building incredibly slowly but surely over vast time scales, creating these amazing rings of life. But how did scientists first figure out the big picture? How these atolls actually form way out in the middle of the ocean?
That's a truly fascinating story in the history of science, and it really circles back to Charles Darwin.
Darwin again. He seems central to understanding these.
He really is. During that famous voyage on HMS Beagle back in the 1830s, Darwin wasn't just collecting finches, he was observing geology and biology all over the world, including coral reefs in the Pacific and Indian Oceans.
And he saw different types of reefs.
Yes, he observed reefs that were right up against the shore of volcanic islands, fringing reefs. He saw reefs that were separated from the island by a lagoon barrier reefs. And then he saw these ring-shaped reefs with only a lagoon in the middle atoll.
Fringing reefs, barrier reefs, atolls. You realized they weren't just different types, but maybe stages in a process.
Precisely. That was his brilliant insight. He proposed that these different reef types weren't unrelated phenomena, but rather different stages in a single, continuous geological and biological process.
And what drove the process, in his view?
He theorized it was driven by the gradual sinking or subsidence of volcanic islands over immense periods of time, combined with the upward growth of coral reefs, which need to stay near the sunlit surface waters to survive.
Okay, so break that down. How does it start?
Okay, imagine a new volcanic island erupts from the seabed and rises above the ocean's surface. As soon as conditions are right, corals start to colonize and grow around its edges, forming a fringing reef right up against the shoreline. This might take, say, around 10,000 years to get well established.
Step one, fringing reef.
Right.
Then the volcano starts sinking.
Exactly. Once the volcano becomes inactive, geological forces cause it and the seafloor beneath it to slowly sink back down. But the coral reef, alive and growing, tries to keep pace. It grows upwards, constantly striving to stay in that shallow, sunlit zone.
So the reef is in this slow-motion race against the sinking landmass. That's the image you used before.
It's the perfect image. And often, conditions for coral growth, things like wave action bringing nutrients and oxygen, are better on the outer edge of the reef, the part facing the open ocean.
Right.
So that outer part tends to grow upwards a bit more vigorously than the inner part closer to the sinking island. As the island continues to sink, this difference in growth rates leads to the formation of a lagoon, a body of water separating the growing reef crest from the shrinking landmass. And voila, you have a barrier reef.
Okay, like the ones around Bora Bora you mentioned.
Bora Bora is a classic example, yes. You can still see the remnants of the volcanic peak in the middle of the lagoon surrounded by the barrier reef. That transition to a barrier reef might take something like 100,000 years or more.
Okay, stage two, barrier reef.
Mhm.
And if the sinking just keeps going relentlessly,
Then eventually, the central volcanic island sinks completely beneath the surface of the ocean. If the coral reef has managed to keep growing upwards, keeping pace with the subsidence and any sea level changes, all that's left at the surface is the ring of living coral reef, enclosing the central lagoon where the island used to be. And that, in essence, is an atoll. Stage 3.
Wow.
For this whole beautiful sequence to work, that upward growth of the coral has to be fast enough to match the rate the island is sinking and keep up with any long-term rises in sea level. It's a really delicate balancing act, played out over hundreds of thousands, even millions of years.
That's an incredibly elegant and logical theory, especially for the 1830s. Was it eventually proven correct? Did they find the sunken volcanoes?
Darwin's theory was remarkably insightful, way ahead of its time. And yes, decades later, in the mid-20th century, it received really strong support from those deep drilling projects we talked about earlier on places like Enuitak and Midway Atoll in the Pacific.
Right, where they drilled down through the coral.
Exactly. They drilled through thousands of feet of ancient coral reef limestone, just the accumulated skeletons of countless generations of corals and algae, and then deep down, they hit the volcanic basalt rock.
The original island base.
Precisely. Just sitting there, far below the current sea level, exactly as Darwin's subsidence theory had predicted. It was compelling physical evidence.
That's amazing validation for his idea. But you hinted earlier that maybe there's a bit more to this story than just Darwin's initial idea. Other factors involved.
Yes, while Darwin's theory of subsidence provides the fundamental framework, and it's definitely correct in many cases, our understanding has become more nuanced over time. We now know other factors play important roles, particularly the dramatic fluctuations in global sea level that have occurred over millions of years.
Sea level changes, like from ice ages.
Exactly. During the repeated glacial cycles of the Pleistocene epoch, the ice ages, vast amounts of water were locked up in continental ice sheets. This caused global sea levels to drop significantly, sometimes by 100 meters or more.
Wow, 100 meters lower. That would expose a lot of shallow areas.
It certainly would. It exposed many shallow water carbonate platforms, including the tops of subsided volcanoes that might have already had some roof growth on them.
Okay, so the platforms were exposed like islands. How did that influence how atolls formed?
This leads to another important concept, sometimes called the antecedent karst model.
Antecedent karst. What does karst mean?
Karst is the geological process where soluble rocks, like limestone, which is what old coral reefs are made of, get dissolved by slightly acidic water, mainly rainwater. Think of how caves and sinkholes form in limestone landscapes on land.
Ah, right. Dissolving the rock away.
Exactly. So during those periods of low sea level, these exposed limestone platforms were subjected to rain and weathering for thousands of years. It's believed that this dissolution, this karstification, might have happened more intensely in the center of these flat-topped platforms.
Why the center?
Maybe because water pooled there more easily. The result could be that the center got eroded downwards, forming a slight depression, while leaving a relatively higher rim around the edges of the platform.
Okay, so low sea level carves out a donut shape almost.
Kind of, yeah. A platform with a raised rim and a lower center. Then, when the ice ages ended and the glaciers melted, sea levels rose again, flooding these eroded platforms.
Right.
As the water rose, corals would find it easiest to start growing on that slightly higher submerged rim first. It offered a good foundation. As sea levels continued to rise, the corals would grow upwards, preferentially along this antecedent rim.
Following the high ground.
Exactly. Eventually forming the characteristic ring shape of the atoll, and the dissolved central depression naturally became the lagoon.
So in this model, the basic shape was sort of pre-carved during low sea level,
Yeah.
and the corals just built on top of that shape when the sea rose again.
That's the core idea. So our modern understanding isn't really an either-or between Darwin's subsidence and this karst idea. It's more likely a fascinating interplay between them.
Both happening.
Yes. Volcanic subsidence creates the initial foundation. Then, the long history of sea level fluctuations, falling during ice ages and rising during interglacials, combined with karst erosion during low stands and vigorous coral growth during high stands, all interact over millions of years to shape the final atoll structure.
Wow, that's complex.
It is. The magnificent atolls we see today are often the result of these multiple processes playing out, especially over the last few 100,000 years during the Pleistocene and Holocene epochs. It's a testament to the power of these combined geological and biological forces working together over immense timescales.
Millions of years. It's still almost impossible to truly grasp that length of time needed to build one of these rings.
It really is staggering. Remember, the entire journey from a brand new volcanic island starting to get its first fringing reef through the barrier reef stage to becoming a fully formed atoll can take hundreds of thousands, often millions, even tens of millions of years.
Just incredible.
That initial fringing reef might take around 10,000 years. The transition to a barrier reef may be 100,000 years or more. Atolls are truly awe-inspiring monuments to deep geological time, and the incredible persistence of life.
Their very existence seems like a success story of balance.
It absolutely is. It highlights this long-term, delicate balance between the sinking of the Earth's crust, the rise and fall of the oceans, and the tenacity of corals and algae growing towards the sun. Atolls represent the successful outcomes of this incredibly long race.
But you mentioned this balance is under threat now.
Yes, that's the critical point. This balance was achieved over geological time. The rapid environmental changes we are causing today, especially the warming oceans leading to bleaching, ocean acidification, making it harder for corals to build skeletons, pollution, sea level rise accelerating, these are happening much, much faster than the coral's ability to adapt or the geological processes they evolved with. That delicate balance is being severely disrupted.
A worrying thought for these incredible places.
It really is. These ring-shaped islands, built by tiny animals over vast geological timescales, are truly wonders of the natural world. They are testaments, as you said, to the power of life to shape our planet in remarkable ways.
Well, from their mysterious ring shapes, born from sinking volcanoes and rising seas, to the tireless work of those tiny coral polyps and their vital algal partners. Atolls are truly remarkable formations. They offer such a unique window into the power of nature and the delicate balance of our planet.
Absolutely, shaped by geological time and just teeming with life.
We really hope this exploration into the world of atolls has sparked your imagination and maybe deepened your appreciation for these incredible ocean ecosystems.
There is still so much to discover about them, their complex ecology, their full geological history, the unique adaptations of the life they support, and of course, finding ways to help them face the challenges ahead.
Perhaps you'll explore further into the incredible biology of corals, the physics of ocean currents around islands, or even the fascinating history of the human cultures that have called these remote rings home for centuries.
Lots more to learn.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Saltwater Stories. We truly appreciate you spending your time with us to learn and explore these ocean jewels.